the Queen's Couch podcast with our amazing host, Dr. Tanika Victoria. She curates a space for women where all women are encouraged to collaborate and do not collide. Join us on the couch tonight. Hello, and thank you for joining the Queen's Couch on tonight. Tonight, we are talking about mental health in ministry. This is a part of our Women's History Month series, and I am so elated to have two amazing women with me on tonight, Miss Neat James and Miss Yolanda. Coach Yolanda, she's an author, coach, and consultant, and Neat James is a licensed professional counselor, and so we are excited to get this conversation started on tonight. But before we get started, I want to let you know that the show on tonight is in no way trying to take the place of seeking a mental health professional. So what our guest tonight will share will be some of their professional, but this is in no way a substitute for mental health counseling on tonight. So I think that clears up our counselors and our coach. So this is just a conversation that we are going to curate on tonight. So thank you for joining us on the couch tonight, Neat James and Coach Yolanda. So tell us a little bit about yourself if you want to go first, Neat, and then Coach Yolanda, and then we'll get it started.
All right. So I am Meet James. I am a licensed clinical mental health counselor. I currently work in the schools. So I'm a school based. My emphasis is children and adolescents. However, I am licensed to counsel married couples, adults, women, and men. So.
All right, thank you. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Coach Yolanda.
Thank you so much for having me. So glad to be in this space with both of you amazing ladies. So my name is Yolanda Rory. I'm an author, coach, and consultant. The coach portion of me, I am a wife thruster. So I have been called to help wives shift from one place to the next in their marriage and also in their life and how they show up in marriage. The book that I wrote is actually for wives called Picking Up the Pieces. And it's my journey of how I had to pick up my pieces and how I had to become accountable for my actions in marriage. The consultant piece, I do public health equity consulting, and that's just a little bit about me.
Thank you so much for being here on tonight. We're excited to have our guests tonight. We want to say hello to each and every one of you. And so we're just gonna dive in. And so as I was thinking about this topic is really near and dear to my heart. I love pastors. I feel like I have a pastor's heart. I have a heart for those who are in ministry. And sometimes it can be difficult. So one of the things that I thought about, it said that at least 1 in 5 pastors or ministry leaders suffer from depression. 90% work 55 to 75 hours per week.
Wow.
And what was the biggest thing? Women in clergy burn out at 15% more than men. The men are at 50%, 40% suffering from burnout, but 65% of women clergy suffer from burnout and have reported significant stress and suffering from burnout symptoms. So women are at a larger rate than men when it comes down to um, suffering with anxiety, depression, when it comes to the ministry. So, what are your thoughts about that, ladies? Do you think those are accurate, right on, or do you think there are more people that are really suffering and not really saying it? Just the people in this survey that they conducted. Do you think it's more or less?
I'm shocked with the 1 out of 5. I would probably guess 3 out of 5. Um, for instance, and I had to learn this myself, depression shows up in different ways. And so some people define depression as the person that's laying in the bed, don't want to get up, but also that person that's constantly going, trying to fill the gaps and going, running. They're depressed too. they're just coping with it in a different way. So I'm surprised that number isn't higher.
I can say that I definitely agree with her. I was going to say 3 or 4 out of the 5 for sure, because data only tells us so much. Data is good. It gives us the starting point. It gives us the point to where we begin to work. But as you said, those that are not in therapy, those that have not spoken to someone and it's been documented, all of that, that's not a part of the data. So really, when you sit down, and I feel like if you really desegregate the data and break it all down and really do more studies, oh yeah, 3 or 4 out of 5 for sure.
So as I think about mental health, one of the things that made me think so much about this topic is my own depression in church. I was the busy bee. I would do in everything you would ask me. I couldn't say no. I just worked until I got to the point where I don't want to do nothing. I don't even want to come to church, but I know I could. I couldn't just stay away from church because I've been in church all my life. But I would be suffering. I would come and I'll be smiling, and I'll go home and I'll be crying. I wouldn't feel fulfilled. I wouldn't feel like I did anything. Like I would minister to people and they would be getting breakthroughs, and I would go home just like, no, this. Are you going to do it for me? Like, what is going on here? How can I help people? How can I pray for people and see them get a breakthrough and nothing's happening for me? I was just really burnt out. And it just really took a toll on just everything. I just had just this, I was just going through the motions. That's all I could say. I was just going through the motions. And so when you think about that, um, I would medicate myself with scriptures. That's what I would say. I would give myself scriptures. Um, you're gonna be strong. You got to be strong. The joy of the Lord is just, and I would keep telling myself that, but the joy wasn't coming. Nothing wasn't happening until I had to find a therapist. And so I had to work on setting boundaries and saying no and staying in my lane and not everybody else's lane. And so that's what prompted me to really think about this tonight. And I want to ask you both, what are some stigmas that you believe hinder good mental health and wellness when it comes down to pastors, ministry leaders, anybody in the church that's working in any capacity, leadership role, intercessors, just someone who's working in church? What are some stigmas that you feel hinder them from getting the help that they really need, deserve, and have to have?
I'll start. So, for me, when you look at the Black church, it has always been a stigma of it's a demon if you suffer with a if you live with a mental illness, and then beyond that is what does the Bible say about who you are? And instead of someone sitting down with us and really breaking down the word. So faith without works is dead. So if I see that something is going on with me and I have faith that God is going to heal me, then what is my works? The fruit of what's going on with me is coming out in my actions, the way I show up, whether I'm a busybody or, as she said, whether I'm laying down, in the house all the time. That's the fruit. But who's going to help me discover the root? And we have the altar for our spirit man, but we got a counselor for our natural man. And I'm a firm believer that Christ in the couch is the perfect recipe. But again, in the Black church, we're not taught that. And in the Black community, it's, oh, you crazy if you got a mental illness. And you got all these words that bring these stigmas attached, and it makes people ashamed because no one is equipped, and nobody's really, a lot of times in families or relationships, has done the work to really understand what a mental illness is. Just like I can take a blood pressure pill for a blood pressure issue. If I got a stomach issue, I'm going to the gastroenterologist. Guess what? I go to the therapy if I got a brain. I go to the therapist if I got a brain issue. If I got something off balance, it's just like any other illness that we may have. And nobody does the work or the research, I don't think, to do that. But then on the other side of that, I'll say, the pastor can't do everything. So who else is in the church helping the pastor out, discussing these type of things?
I definitely agree with everything she said, especially. So mental health and spiritual health is such a kind of thin line, to be honest. And so sometimes we try to over spiritualize things that really is a mental and an emotional, like it has to be taken care of in a different manner, in a different way. And so we kind of grow up, and not just the Black community, but mostly just thinking that, oh, you crazy, or how we would always say that girl need to be on Bull Street, and just kind of like throw those jokes out there lightly, but it's a real thing. So I think understanding, like, yeah, prayer is great, and I'll always pray. Like, my kids come in my office, they don't know I'm praying, but I'm praying because I know they got to go home from this. But at the same time, I do feel like God will give you resources, and He's not coming down to earth. I mean, He can do all, but He's not coming here to get in your mind and just wipe it clean. Like, there's work that has to be done. So He'll put resources, He'll put psychiatrists if, it's that level you need medication to help balance this thing. Or He'll put counselors here as a resource to help you get where you need to get. So I think just learning to, we just can't over spiritualize everything and call a spade and get the help.
I definitely agree with both of you ladies that it's definitely something that needs to be talked about a lot more than it really is. I do hear some churches having um, mental health ministries, and so, but there's some that are still, not ready to chart those waters and ready to do those things. Well, what are some things that you feel is necessary to get people to understand that you need the help, you need self-care, you need to set boundaries? And one of the things, I always remember growing up, um, my grandmother always said, you have to work for God, you have to work for God. And she always said that you can't tell the house of the Lord no. And so those things sometimes are embedded in us, and they sometimes damage us in such a way that we feel like our works merit us to things from God when they really don't merit us. Because if our works had merited us, He wouldn't have died on the cross before He even knew we were going to come to Him. So our works don't really merit us. But I think because we grew up, sometimes when you grow up in church and you hear that all the time, you can't say no. So you're telling God no. Even if it's not your capacity, you try things, you put on shoes, you go in areas that really are not yours, because you have a love to see the things of God. You have a love to see the house of God grow and flourish. But sometimes you're misplaced in areas that is just so hard for you to manage, that it just really adds overwhelm and stress. And sometimes you cause more damage than good. I've seen people bleeding on the people, just having tantrums in the pulpit. I've seen a lot of different things. And I used to be kind of judgmental, like they should know better, until I went through my own journey and I had to realize that depression shows up in different ways. They may just be snapping. They may be at a place where they can't take it anymore, and they're just acting out of what they're going through. So I want to ask you, ladies, I know both of you have been on a journey with mental health, sharing that. Tell me a little bit about each of your journeys and what that looked like, and why are you passionate about mental health and wellness and people getting the help that they need. Both Christ and the couch, Jesus and a therapist is both of your saying. So tell me, what brought you to this place? What made you feel like, listen, I know that I need to get help. And after I've gotten this help, I want to help other people know that it's okay. and embrace them, put your arms around them. So tell me a little bit about that journey.
So for me, and my family said, I've always been like the listening ear for people. So I knew growing up, like, I just want to help people. I just want to help people. And that was almost like my self-fulfillment, like helping people. So I went to college. I was like, okay, I was supposed to be a pediatrician. Listen, biology said no, sis. I ended up doing nursing, and then it was like, no. But whenever I would take like the different personality tests and all that, it always came to like counseling and psychology. But they tell you, oh, you're not gonna make any money if you major in psychology. So I basically did what everybody else, and that was a life pattern of doing what made everybody else happy. Of course, I grew up in the church. I'm like you said, my mama, she only what you do for Christ will last. Only what you do for Christ will last. So that was beat in my head. And I mean, I still live. I understand that. But like you said, understanding those boundaries and stuff. So I just like I went. But for me, really like going into counseling, I always knew it was something I wanted to do. But 2018 was like a real shaking in my life. I had a miscarriage, and in neat fashion, I felt like, okay, it's over, it's done, bam, you're good, you're cleared to go back to work. So I went even harder with just running, until one day I had a panic attack, and this was on Thanksgiving, and I didn't even know what it was. I thought I was having a heart attack. And I ended up in the ER. Like, my husband had to call the ambulance for me and everything. And so it was in that moment, like, I realized you went through grief of losing that baby and you didn't deal with it. On top of the childhood trauma that, came out. And so it was like, you need to. So I started seeing a therapist then too, to work on my own healing. Well, 5 years, like really the past 5 years or so, like being a functional depressed person, going, and working in church. And that's the thing, like you said, sometimes we use that busyness and that working in the church as a coping mechanism. And then eventually we start to resent the thing that we were using as a therapy and as coping. And you're snapping on people. You're going and you're doing it. And for me, I'm a praise and worship leader. You're doing it in front of people. Of course, you got to smile. You can't be. And yet you go home crying, and you've been taught only what you do for Christ will last. So you still got that. But you're depressed functioning in church every Sunday because you got to do it in front of the people. So COVID really, I'll tell people, COVID was a blessing for me. It made me sit down and work on me and learn boundaries and get the true healing that I really need to understand why I even gave so much. There was childhood things and childhood reasons why I was just giving without any regard to putting my household in a financial bind, put my husband just giving. But there were underlying reasons. Yeah, that's my heart, but I was overdoing it. So sometimes you can get involved in stuff so heavily to medicate the pain, to cope, and then you start to resent that one thing that you thought was like your therapy and your release, because you didn't set those boundaries in your life, and now they're surfacing and you're realizing like, nah, sis, that ain't it. So I'm passionate more so about kids and women because, again, I went through sexual trauma as a child, and I'm a testimony of God's delivering power. And I know, I don't care how hard it is, He's able to do it. But I do feel like you need counseling and a counselor, somebody to hold you accountable to help you get that. If you make up in your mind that I want to be delivered, I want to be healed from this thing, and it's a journey because healing is a constant thing. Every day we're here healing. Ing means over and over and over and over. And sometimes you think you got it, and it come in a different little, and it's like, God, dog, I done went back. But that's okay. That's part of the journey. That's part of healing. So you just keep pressing and you keep, but a counselor holds you accountable. At least I'm that type, like I'm solution focused. We can come in here and talk about it, what happened and all. And it might be a couple sessions we need to talk about what happened. But at the end of the day, I'm asking you now, what do you want? How do you see, what do you want to gain from counseling? Because if you want to just keep talking about that, I'm probably not the counselor for you. Because I'm trying to get solutions, and counseling isn't made for you to have the rest of your life. Like, you got to graduate. We give you the tools, you're going to graduate, okay? We're not going to keep being counseling for 5 years. So I'm just passionate. I got into it because I want to see people deliver, because I know it's possible. I know it can happen.
Amen to all of that. So for me, it was my issues really came out when I got married 20, well, it'll be 21 years next month. 21 years ago, when I thought I was whole and I thought I had it all together, and I became one with somebody else. Then the rejection, then the insecurities, and all these things begin to show up and rear their ugly head. And I couldn't function. Yeah, I was still showing up on the praise and worship team. Yeah, I was still showing up on the door if I was ushering or whatever it was that I was doing. But at the same time, I didn't have the tools or the resources to get over it and come out of it and do my works. Because as she said, God can do it. And so I'll never forget, I was in school to actually get a psychology degree. Never forget. I wanted to be a psychologist. And in the middle of the bedroom, I was walking around because when I would study for a test, I would call the stuff out to myself and I would say it out loud, just walk around the room. And like in the middle of that, God said, my people aren't pages in a book. And so I'm like, what, God, what do you mean? And so I knew in that, but the more he talked to me, that psychology, a psychology degree wasn't what he wanted me to do. So, but I knew I was called to help people. I knew I was supposed to talk to people. I knew you couldn't tell me that that's not what he called me to do. So I'm like, okay, God, you got to direct me. So I called my advisor and I talked to the advisor, and the advisor was like, well, maybe it's life coaching that you should be doing, because in therapy, there are ethics and there are bylaws that prevent them from actually telling or interjecting their personal story in their sessions. But in coaching, it's about what you've been through to help somebody else. And so he was like, well, maybe it's that. And he was like, so just get your bachelor's in, finish your bachelor's in psychology, or switch to social work, and then get the, what do you call it? The specialization in life coaching. And so I was like, okay, I thought about that, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna do the life coaching. And the more I did the life coaching, in the life coaching program, it seemed like the more my marriage fell apart. I remember reading a book, Lori Gottlieb, and the title of the book was I think you should talk to someone. And her quote in the book was, the more you help others see themselves, the more you see yourself. So I started coaching. Sure enough, every woman that came and sat in my chair or on my little lounge chase chair that I had, like I was being triggered. Every session, they would think I'm listening to them, and I am gone because something she said has triggered me. And I'm like, God, I have got to do something. So intercession is my gift. I'm an intercessor. Went in my prayer closet one night, make a long story short, I had this long list of people I was going to pray for and take up before God. And God said, your husband is not your daddy. I said, oh my God. And he just began to flash back before me, my dad not being in my life. And when my dad showed up in my life, and then he left again, and he just flashed it back before me. And I was like, oh my God. And that's when I said, okay, I can't do this. I got to go to therapy for this. Now, what I did do once I got into therapy, whatever it was that the therapist told me to do, I took it to God. And I said, God, is now the time for me to implement this? And if it is, then how do I do it? Or if it's not, then God, you tell me when it's time for me to do this. So it was always the couch and Christ together. I would go to my sessions, whatever it was she told me to do. If I got the okay from God, I started to work because he knows what we're able to stand. And if I'm going to try to implement something that I ain't even ready for myself, and I was going to make matters worse. So that's why I say I always took it back to God, and it just changed my entire life because I had to deal with the mama issues. I had to deal with the daddy issues and everything that came with it. I had to deal with me being the lost child, which caused me to be an adult who's always looking for something or someone. So that's my short spiel.
That was so amazing, and you too have such amazing stories and so passionate about helping individuals have the best wellness that they can have. So, what would you say to an individual that's stressed and overwhelmed? What are some practical steps that they can take to help them along their journey? What are some things that they need to implement? What are some boundaries that they need to set in order to start this journey of making their mental health and their wellness a priority?
I would say, and I kind of adopted it. So as I was going through my intern, so I'm learning, but I'm being counseled at the same time. So I sat under a wonderful counselor named Dr. Brooks, and so she would always talk about circle of control. And so I had to, cause man, listen, I'd be worried about Japan and just everywhere. Can't sleep at night worrying about stuff that I don't even have. It's not even, you can have a passion for something, but everything you can't fix. And so sometimes you really have to evaluate what is really in my circle of control and literally draw a circle. And sometimes I have to write down, okay, here are the things I've been worried about. I've been losing sleep over. Now, is this really in my circle of control? So when you break that thing down, sometimes you realize you can't even fix it. So why are you worried? But writing it out, actually, putting that pen to paper, sometimes it allows you to see, like, since you worried about something that's not in, you want this person to change and be, yeah, you can see the potential in them and you stressing out because I know they can be better. And at the end of the day, it's their choice. You can't stress about that. You can offer words of encouragement, but going to the extent of being stressed out about something you can't change if that person is not ready to do that. So I would encourage people to just sit and think and write it out. What is, because some people be like, you ask them what's going on, child, everything. Well, what is everything? Give me 5 of those. And my husband used to do that to me, and I used to be so mad. It's everything. He's like, well, you should be, if it's everything, you should be able to give me 3 or 4. So sometimes writing it out and listing it helps you see, and even talking it out with a therapist, because sometimes your therapist may not be offering you advice, but sometimes you hearing it be like, dang, that's stupid. Why am I doing it? She ain't had to say a word, but sometimes talking it out, writing it out can help you kind of pinpoint some of those things that may have that be causing you anxiety or got you stressed out. So I would say write it out and figure out what's in your circle of control. What can you work on and work toward, and what is it? And I guarantee your list of stressing and anxiety, it'll probably start to diminish when you realize I can't fix that anyway. So why am I stressed out about it?
I think me and Nita are sisters. Like, so for me, when I get to my second thing, it's literally like almost word for word what she said, but I just got a different title for it. So the first thing is CPR: catch, pause, release, and replace. So you've caught that something's going on, something got you out of whack, whatever it is. Pause, just stop. Just stop. Now, how, once you stop, how can you release it? What does it take? What are the steps? And so that's where my worry tree comes in. Draw a tree, like a little Christmas tree or whatever kind of tree. On the left side, can I change it? If yes, then what do I need to do to change it? On the right side, no, leave it blank because ain't nothing you can do about it. We can't control people's responses. We can't control how they show up. We can't control what they do, how they act, any of that. And we have to be okay with releasing that, you know. And on the other side of that, if it's still bothering you, then okay, what is the pattern I have recognized that I picked up here now? And now that I've got the pattern, how can I change my language about it? How can I change, you know, even the relationship? Does the relationship need to look different? Do I need to, the person maybe used to be my inner circle, do I need to reposition them to my outer circle now? And starting boundaries with me first before I can set them for somebody else. Because it's no good for me to tell Neat or to Nico what I'm not gonna do if I'm not gonna hold to the boundary. So I had to learn that I had to set boundaries for Yolanda as well.
That boundary thing, Nico, you talked about it, but that's important. I'm still working, so I'm recovering. But I mean, it's a work in progress. But you will realize, and something that kind of resonates with me too is don't expect you from other people. And my husband will preach that to me over and over because I will be like, I did that. Don't expect. And so when you do that, honestly, it changes your whole perspective. When you just be you, just do you, and not expect that. Don't expect you from other people because you'll be let down every time. You're going to be stressed over and over because it's like, well, I gave them this and I did. That's how you let go of some of that anxiety, some of that stress, some of that unnecessary chaos going on in your head when you just realize I can't expect you because it's only one need. Period. It's only one need. And I can't expect me from everybody else.
You just hit the nail on the head. Like when we're walking around with all these unvoiced and unmet expectations from somebody else, it's because we're looking for them to be us. They can't. God didn't make them us. And so you got a ball of anger and frustration and all this stuff and regret, like she said, inside of you. Know what you're gonna do with it because you put it there. They didn't put it there. You did.
And ain't nothing worse than them walking around like that's just like with forgiveness. Child, they over here sleeping. You over here losing sleep. Make it make sense. Like but it's because they don't even know they done offend you or done something to you. So you're walking around with that. So you expecting you from somebody else, it's honestly just crazy. Like it's crazy because it's only one you.
That is so good. Listen, setting boundaries. I'm getting. I set boundaries with myself because just as you said, if I don't set boundaries with myself, I'm not going to be able to set it with other people. And so that's what I have been learning to do um, in my life, and learn to just say certain things. We're not going to discuss that. That's not where we're going to do right now. That's not where we're going to go at this point. And so learning to do that and learning to not, if it's not a good time, to say, hey, you know what, I really want to do this, but I owe it to myself to do something that I need to do. And I think sometimes we take part of the scripture that people always say, love your neighbor as yourself, but they always pick that love your neighbor part, but as yourself. But if you're not loving yourself and you're not learning how to have priority for yourself, you're not really walking in that scripture. It's fake and it's false because you're not loving yourself. How is it possible that you're going to love somebody else? How is it possible that you're showing up for everybody else, but you're not showing up for you? And I think that's sometimes when we get in a space where it's kind of a thin line between. I tell people you have to have self-care. Self-care and self-indulgence are two different things. And I think sometimes when you see things on TV, oh, they at the spa, they spending thousands. That's really not self-care. That gives people a false identity of what it is. Sometimes it's just saying no, or sometimes it's just putting yourself first for once. And I think sometimes um, in church it's hard for an individual to put themselves first because they don't want to seem that they're selfish, or they don't care about the ministry. But if I fall apart and I'm over, say, 3 or 4 ministries, I fall apart. Nobody knows how to do anything that I can do, and I fall apart. 1/3 of the church just fell apart. If you only got 12 ministries, so what sense does that make to keep going? If you don't get poured into, and things like that. I'm a firm believer that pastors should take a sabbatical. I feel that in a black church we don't. We take a sabbatical when we at our wits end. I have, you know, I have I I grew up in a black church, but I always worked in a Caucasian church. I'll put it like that. And when I worked at this one Caucasian church, the summer the pastor was gone. If you're a minister, you on duty. You're gonna preach the Sundays. He went with his family. He would not be there. He would be gone from like June. He'll come back in August. And that was a time for him to do that. And I think sometimes, I don't know what it is sometimes about the black church, that black pastors or ministry leaders that feel like if they're not there, it's just going to fall apart. And so I always want to unpack that. Like, what do you think it is that's just driving them, that I can't take a break, I can't miss a Sunday, I can't miss a Wednesday or a Thursday or whatever, I can't miss anything? And sometimes what ends up happening, they're having heart attacks, they're having health challenges, because mental health and physical health are like a string. If one isn't right, the other isn't going to be right. And so sometimes, most of the time, when you hear these pastors or even ministry leaders, they went up there and they just preached their heart out and went in the office and died. What made that happen? Because they ignored all the signs that their body was telling them for the sake of pouring to someone else. And so, what
It's
would you say to that person?
The
it's the
number.
unrealistic expectations of the saints too. Y'all looking for a perfect. They're still men. They're still women. Like, they're human. So you want? Oh, I can't go to the assistant pastor. Got to be pastor. Got to. He's human too, and they have. I'm with the vacation. And I ain't talking just no 1 week here, 1 week. No, there's not, because they do need to be poured into. And they do need to have that moment where they can be human. And some of the saints just really need to take some of those unrealistic expectations off your man and woman of God. Just stop.
Yep, I
Because
agree.
half of y'all can't be a pastor yourself.
That part.
Wouldn't even last. Wouldn't even last. And some pastors, at least a good pastor like the one I got, they ain't broadcasting all the people they meeting with and the people that's going crazy and all the fires that they putting out. So they're suffering basically in silence and stressed out. Like, y'all got to stop. Y'all have got to stop.
And for me, it goes back to the scripture that says, "Whatever you do, do it as unto the Lord," and how the old people used to tell us, "What you do for God, is all that's going to matter and it's all that's going to count. And so then on the other side of that, I'm talking about the older generation of pastors now, maybe I'm going to say 50 and up. Think about it. Their parents raised them from their parents coming off of the back of slavery. So what was it? Do, or it wasn't good enough. The generations now are getting to the place where they understand that it ain't got to be like that, and they're going to speak up and they're going to do things differently. So they brought that into the pulpit. They understand boundaries. They didn't understand, hey, you know what? I am working for God, but my sanity is important as well. And as she said, they're trying to counsel 50, 60, 70, 80 people. They ain't broadcasting it. But who's taking the load off of them? They can't be everything to everybody. If they were, what we need God for? But it takes members with enough sense to know, don't let me burden my pastor down with everything. What is my work that I need to do for myself? The pastor can't do everything for me. So that's my answer.
No, I totally agree. The pastor cannot do everything. You know, sometimes the pastor just finished preaching, done prayed, prophesied. You coming there for extra prayer? Like, get out of here. Why didn't you come to the prayer line? What's going on here? And those are some things that I have to take a pause, because sometimes I want to be like, we just had a prayer line up here. Why are you getting special prayer? Like, oh, it's 75 ministers here. Can you go to one of them and get some prayer? You know, I think I read a while back that a pastor preaching a 45-minute to 50-minute sermon is an equivalent of an 8-hour workday. So what, it's like he just preached, and that's just a regular sermon. We're not talking about you don't lay hands on people, you don't have a deliverance service, you don't prophesy to people. And when you are really, people don't sometimes understand what happens when you're in the spirit realm. The tiredness from you coming back into the natural is unreal. It's like you're deprived. You're like, oh my goodness, what happened to me? That's why you really need to, and that's why a lot of pastors don't speak to their members. They go straight to the back. And they're not being selfish. They're not being rude. They are, guess what? They need to go back. Not that they don't spend time later with them talking, but it needs to be a boundary that right after they preach, they need to go to the back. And
And my
that's
thing,
that's my firm belief about it. I mean,
yeah,
pastors don't do it, but I believe that they
yeah,
should do it because it's such a hard transition back. Everything is going on. Your senses is wide open. It just shouldn't happen.
yeah. And your virtue, you talked about it, has come out of you. So you need to be restored. You need to be poured back into. And my thing is, do the members know God for themselves? Pastor is not your God. Get on your own knees. Do you have a relationship with God? And ask God for yourself what you need. But it's a deficit. It is a deficit in the church.
It definitely is. So listen, I want to thank you ladies on tonight. And in true Queen's Couch fashion, we always switch it up and we always ask a question. And one of the questions I want to ask you ladies, you kind of touched on it and you said, of course, the pastor can't do everything and anything. So I want to ask you ladies, if you had an opportunity right now to speak to a pastor that is overwhelmed and stressed out, what would you say to it?
That's a loaded question. And I'm going to tell you why I say that. Because it depends on the mentality of the pastor, if they would even receive it when you be real about it. Because those that are still in the go, 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 I got to do mode, they may not, I'm not going to say they won't receive it. They will, but they're not going to put action behind it because they're going to go back to, I got to show up and it's just this. Now, though, but nonetheless, you asked me the question, what would I say? I would definitely say to them, I see what you do. I see your pour. I see your push. I even see the stress behind your pour, your push, the heaviness, the weight of it, the WEIGHT of it all. And I would ask them, do is it hard or is it within your capacity and your capability to rest? And what does rest look like for you? If you are granted rest, what does it look like for you? And then whatever the answer was to me, I would say, okay, are you ready for it?
Me personally, I'm just I probably just go straight to it. Man of God, I need you to take a rest. But like she said too, sometimes we ourselves just don't even know what true rest even look like. Because that's just like, just because I get into bed at 9 o'clock and I get 8 hours, is my mind free? Is my mind clear? Am I really resting? You know? So sometimes you have to ask those questions that might seem like, oh, you being funny, or but maybe they don't even know what true rest even look like. So they may need to kind of dive into that and probably see what is the real reason why I can't seem to rest. Or what is the real reason why I can't leave for longer than a week or two. But I would say this too, if they hear from God, God will deal with you before he deal with you about your members or anything else. And if you are a true man and woman of God, he'll speak to you and let you know, man of God, I need you to sit down. Woman of God, I need you to sit down. So if you're preaching to your congregation and tell them, listen to the voice of God, listen to the voice of God, man and woman of God, you got to listen to and be accountable for your own health, your own mental health, because you cannot, there's no way you cannot continue to pour from an empty fountain. You're going to be dried up, crusted over. Like you can't. So, I mean, but asking those real questions like, so what does rest look like to you? And it don't have to be no whole deep, long thing, but see where they at, because maybe they really don't even understand what rest look like. Because just because you're not preaching, if you're still toiling over other stuff and not allowing, yeah, he may not be in the pulpit preaching, but he's still toiling and he's not getting rest. She's not getting rest. So they just have to understand creating those boundaries and finding out what true rest really is.
Thank you, ladies, so much. I really appreciate you all being on the couch with me tonight, talking about mental health, talking about ministry and mental health. It is my prayer that this conversation really helps someone see the light, really help them realize how important their mental health is and how important it is to prioritize not only prayer, deliverance, but also coupling it with, as you said, the couch, and knowing that there's Jesus and therapy, and that when it's time for a deliverance, you need other things to go with it. Just like when you have surgery, and they give you this, they tell you, hey, on the fifth day you need to take out your band-aids, hey, you need to come back for this, you need to do that. So when you go to the altar that one time, what is your care plan to make sure that you're maintaining this deliverance that you've got? Because I've been the girl who done went to the altar 1 million times for the same thing. It's not that I didn't get delivered, but nobody told me how to keep my deliverance.
There you
Nobody
go.
told me that I needed counselor, that really this deliverance was childhood trauma that I needed to unpack. Like this bitterness I had. Yeah, I had it for my daughter, father, and I probably got delivered that time. But then I might have had some bitterness when something happened when I was a child. So I didn't go through my care plan after I got delivered, after I came to the altar. And this is the only place where you don't get care plans. Because when you go to the doctor and you have a serious surgery, having a deliverance is like a surgery.
Mm-hmm.
Something is
Now,
taken out of you, like a literal surgery. Like you done pushed out a baby, had a C-section. That's what a deliverance is like. So when you get a C-section, the doctor ain't just telling you to go home and not telling you what to do. So when people come to the altar and get deliverance, somebody needs to tell them what needs to happen for them to maintain the deliverance that they just got. Or what will happen, as the word says, that one demon's going to come back with his 7 friends.
7.
They're coming back. So it's
Right.
going to be 8.
Right.
So that's what's happening to people. And you're thinking that they're playing with the Lord. They're not. They just don't have a
They
care for.
don't know.
They just don't know how to keep their deliverance. Maybe they did have a real experience with the Lord. They really did, but they didn't know how to keep it. And
Right.
so I want, I'm very passionate about that because I know what it's like to go through things and not know how to keep that or not know how to maintain it because you wasn't properly taught. You just was given a scripture. That scripture wasn't broken down to you. You didn't know that you needed to pray more. All the things that came out of you, need to talk more. You need to get that things out of you. So if you are on here, and I just want to appeal to you tonight, listen, if you are having issues, if you're what I call the busy bee, or if you're crying at night, it is a sign that you need to possibly seek a therapist, seek counseling. And I know sometimes people want to get pastoral counseling. I'm talking about a licensed professional counselor that is trained. And sometimes you might need a trauma therapist to help with some of those things. There are different, we go through a lot as women. Many of us has been molested. We never even said anything. Many of us have experienced rejection in ways that we cannot even imagine. And we're walking out our lives through rejection. We're walking out our lives through trauma. We're still that 12-year old girl or that 7-year old girl. But I want you to realize that you can have Jesus and a therapist. And so I want to thank you ladies on tonight for coming and sharing. I think we need a part 2. I don't know. We might need a part 2 because
Yeah.
there's so much to unpack. There's so much to talk about when it comes down to ministry and uh, mental health and marketplace, and just being able to take your divinity and your humanity and wrapping them around somebody is not an easy task. And sometimes pastors aren't taught that, lay members aren't taught that. It's
Oh,
it's a task that you have to work on, because that's what this generation needs. They need their lived experience to be able to have to be coupled with their spiritual experiences. And so I thank you ladies for sharing, for being transparent, for being honest, and just being relevant and real and raw to help the people on this podcast. So thank you so much for being on here tonight, Neat and Coach Yolanda. And before you go, tell us what you have going on. I will tell you, Coach Yolanda has an amazing wife group. I am in that group, and I'm here to tell you all, it has changed my life. I am really diving in. It's for wives, those who are dating, ladies in waiting. And guess what? It is definitely what I didn't know I needed, but I'm glad that I am in this group. And it's a community of women. It's very confidential. You can be yourself. And I'm telling you, it is an amazing place to emerge, and it's exciting. And so, if you want to share a little bit about that, Coach Yolanda, I would love for you to share.
thank you, Tanika. To God be the glory. Like, so Woman Emerge is a coaching and support group for wives, women in waiting, or women that are dating. And that's what we're doing. We are emerging out of every stuck and stagnant place in our life. And not only are we digging in the word of God, but we're doing our practical work as well. And then also we recognize that we are the hands and feet of Jesus. So we're getting ready to do some community service as well in the group. And I just don't have words, because it's just God showing up being God. Like, and as Taniko said, it's a brave space. It's a safe space. And I don't use safe space lightly because safe means different things to different people. It's a confidential space. We are sisterhood. We love on each other. We cry together. We pray together. We fast together. We just doing what God has called us to do. And in this season, He has called us to be unleashed, to be revealed, and that means emerge. And that is what we're doing. We have a virtual subscription. It's only $150. So that's when you join us on Zoom Wednesday mornings at 7 a.m. for prayer, Friday evenings at 7 p.m. for the empowerment coaching. That's every week all year long. Or you can get the combo package, and that is everything in that virtual package, along with free admission into the in-person sessions, 25% off of individual coaching sessions with me, and 25% off of all woman emerge apparel. And then there are other packages as well if you go to my website. So I'm just so excited about what God is doing. It's definitely a God thing, and that's what I have.
Make sure you share your website. I'd love to join.
Oh, awesome.
Listen,
Yes,
I'm
yes,
all for being the best wife I can be. I'm here for it. And you can
yes, yes,
always learn. You gotta be teachable.
yes.
Um, so I don't really necessarily have anything like going, but again, I kind of talked about I'm more so like children, adolescents. So I do want to encourage parents to pay attention to the signs that their children may be showing, and don't be afraid to get them the help that they need. If they're struggling with ADHD, or because it's a real thing, and it's things that people don't understand, and you just think, oh, it's them being grown and being fast and this and that, and it's really something chemically they can't even help. So I would encourage parents to be open, and just women, there's more strength in you admitting that you need help than having pride and just taking it to the Lord in prayer. He has the resources here to help us here on earth. So don't be afraid to reach out and get you a therapist, girl. I guarantee you it's life changing. You might cry some sessions. Shoot, you might want to fight them when you leave. Cause I know one of mine, I was just like, oh, you're not gonna tell me, because I thought, listen, I was big mad. So I was like, don't. But when I sat and I'm like, do you want to change, sis, or do you want to keep going through this cycle? You choose. I choose to not keep going through it. So sometimes it takes that uncomfortableness to become comfortable and become healed. And it's a journey. Healing is continual. So
Thank you so much, so much. I will drop the link. It will be in the description. The link for the Woman Emerge. I'll put that in the descriptions for everyone to have on tonight. And so I just thank you, ladies, so much. It has been such an honor and such a pleasure to have both of you on this space. We definitely will have you back on the couch. And so I'm excited. So I just want to tell all of you tonight, thank you for joining the Queen Couch. This is the place where queens collaborate and do not collide. We will see you on next Thursday, where our topic will be the soft girl era or submission. Are they the same, or is it personal expression? And so I'm
Oh,
excited about that on next week. You have a great one, and we will see you on the Hello and welcome to the Queen's Couch Podcast with our amazing host, Dr. Tanika Victoria. She curates a space for women where all women are encouraged to collaborate and do not collide. Join us on the couch tonight.